Hey, this is CodingRook. It's been a while since I posted on my channel, and I just wanted to give a little update on what I've been up to. I participated in my first ever game jam, GameDevTV's game jam that had the theme of time. And so, for those who have followed my streams on Twitch, and obviously if you've seen the previous videos, you'll know that I was already trying to develop a time travel themed game myself, which I call Project Chrono RPG. And now that I think about it, it's probably not an RPG, but a chrono adventure, a chrono action adventure, but that's another story and something we will tackle later, I guess. But yeah, I decided a little bit late that I should participate. So it took me about a week, maybe, or just a little bit more to decide. And I just wanted to show you guys what I came up with. I decided to do something and challenge myself with something new. And I hadn't done anything with platformers. And since I work in Unreal, obviously, I decided to fire up the platformer template and work from there. And I'll show you the finished product, and I'll talk a little bit about how it started and what I've been doing. So I created Brutal Times, which is a platformer where you basically race against the clock and avoid death traps and do a bit of puzzle solving. And the other way I kind of played on the theme of time was that I added time capsules. So the player starts with 30 seconds for each level, gets time capsules for added time. You may get hit with penalty capsules, or not hit, but if you accidentally pick one up, you lose time. And yeah, the point is you just have to race against the clock, avoid some death traps, press switches, open doors, and you have to be fast about it, otherwise obviously you run out of time. And yeah, like, if anybody has ever started the template for a 2D or 3D platformer, you'll see that the first platform blocks haven't really changed much, but obviously as I built out the levels, I added some more stuff. So this is like a typical little example. The first switch controls one door. The second switch seems to be controlling both doors, but I guess the little secret here is that this is a plain on-off switch, but the two switches have direct control over the first door, and it's sort of like I believe it's an exclusive or type of relationship. If the door only opens if only one of these one of these platforms is switched on, and that's why I have those like torch indicators to let the player know what's on and what's off. So in this instance, the first door opens. The second door opens because both of them are on, and so you'll see that the second door is only open when one of the two, but not both, are open. So anyway, so you have to go like through a combination and get a door open. You can pick up stuff like barrels, drop them down, and you're supposed to go around and open another door. So this was kind of like the idea of the game. And I can actually fire up the map as well. I don't want to play it for the purpose of this video, just to explain. And I can explain what this is and why this is called number 2, Puzzle Run 2. Oh yeah, so this is like an inside area with a dungeon, moving platforms that you have to hop over across. There's like an Indiana Jones type of ball with spikes that comes after you once you follow down this ramp. You jump over. Again, there's like doors and switches that you have to press in a certain combination. There's chests that you have to find keys for in order to unlock them before you get to the finish. So, and actually, I may have a very early stage version of this game, just to show you guys how it kind of looked in the very beginning. UE4 package games. So this is an executable. Less options in the control menu, and there you go. As you can see, no sound yet. Although this is still a pretty advanced stage because I have more UI fleshed out. But as you can tell, there's still the background walls and stuff. But like these platforms, these first few blocks are like part of the template. Okay, so I do have funny game code over here. You can see like I have placeholders for a lot of things. So yeah, so this was the project. It was challenging, you know, to complete it in 3 weeks. I used 2 packs. For the most part, I heavily, obviously you may guys recognize the asset pack if you have taken the, I guess the remastered version of the C++ Unreal course from GameDevTV. I didn't. I took the very first one, the original one, where the building escape did not involve the dungeon, but I was aware of the asset and it was free as per the rules of the game jam. So I recycled, not recycled, but I heavily used, you know, things like the walls and some of the decorative stuff, the gargoyles and the cells to kind of create a dungeon torture cell type of atmosphere within my world. Obviously, you've seen the outside area. One of the things I had trouble with was the project size ballooned fairly quickly once I started importing all of these things. Like the textures are just very large. I had added a more kind of high resolution type of nature pack asset for these trees. Eventually I had to cut that down because the project was just enormous. And I basically imported the trees from another free asset on the Epic Marketplace, the Infinity Grasslands or whatever it's called, something like that. And so I went with that. But yeah, this was this was the I guess the map element of the effort, and you know it was a bit of a challenge to come up with interesting puzzles to keep the player a little bit engaged. But for the most part, the puzzles are simple. Like I said, it's only kind of figuring out doors and how they open. The path is sort of predictable. There's no, there's only one way to kind of navigate things. I made sure that obviously things get sealed off with spikes or walls. It can be a little bit unforgiving with these spikes. They're everywhere. So one of the first things I did was I kind of, decided on some basic shapes, capsules and sizes for these guys, for the time capsules. And I went with like a hierarchical type of approach. I had my pickup class, kind of defining the very basic type of functionality, it was collected, blueprint native implementation type of thing. The default sub-objects, i.e., the mesh and the sound. And then this is how I normally like to work. I create a couple of parent classes in C++, and then I go into blueprint mode after that, and I extend and modify things more appropriately in blueprint. And in this case, this is the pickup for the gold capsule, which is, I guess the bigger bonus. It gives you 10 seconds. One of the things that I was trying to do that I wasn't able to achieve was to find a way to have one blueprint time pickup. And actually, if you see my hierarchy here in the content browser, pickups, I had a generic BP time pickup, and then I duplicated that, or triplicated that, or quadruplicated that accordingly to get the different metal capsules and their time values. What I was trying to do was have some sort of, I guess, data structure within the blueprint, like a struct, so that once I brought that into the world, I could click on the details panel, and somewhere I can say, now this is a gold one, this is a copper one, it is worth 10 seconds rather than 20, and something that would automatically then refresh and update its texture from gold to silver to whatever it needed to be. But even though I know how to work with structs, with basic structs in Unreal, I just couldn't figure out how to do what I wanted so that it could also be kind of real time, as in you drop this in, and I wanted to have like a drop down menu that had predefined struct elements. There was the gold struct, and the gold struct had elements such as material and time value, so I couldn't exactly figure that out. And obviously time was ticking, no pun intended, and I just I had to work fast, so I just replicated the rather I didn't replicate it. I think all of these guys inherit from BP time pickup, and then I duplicated the first one. I did the gold one and created all the other metals and times. So that was one of my first elements, and then I used that to kind of add some additional stuff like like a climbing ability pickup. So the pickups are mostly time, but then I started toying around with the idea of having capsules or other shapes that give you random times, like the pyramids, rotating pyramid, and each face is worth a different time value, and it has a different material. But I also then came up with abilities. I meant to do things like invincibility or speed booster. My guy was jumping too much, and he was too fast already, so I feared that people wouldn't be able to control the character, and he would slide onto spikes, and it would be more frustrating. So, but besides, I didn't have time to do more, and so this was just a ability pickup that you had to pick up at some point in the level so that you could actually climb. And I'll talk about climbing in a little bit. And then one of the other things I did was from my Chrono RPG project, I brought in the chest and key combination, so that if a player has has a key in their inventory, they can collect the key, and when they reach it, they can kind of choose to interact with the chest and open the key. And if we could take a look at my code, for those that have seen my previous work on Chrono RPG, I have a similar type of hierarchy again here. I started with an interactable prop base, and that's where my chest in the world inherits from, so that it can be interacted with and open, and so do the barrels that you notice quickly in the playback demo. And so with the appropriate press of a single button, in this case the left mouse button, you can either, when you are near a barrel, pick up the barrel, or when you're near a chest, but you also have the key in your inventory, you can unlock that chest. And so, if we go back into Unreal Editor, some of the props that are in the game, such as the barrel, they all inherit from interactable prop. I guess I layer things like this. I first create a parent blueprint as well that inherits from the C++ class, and I define some base functionality for everyone in terms of like things like, how does the text trigger work? This is the kind of volume that once the character crosses, then it prompts the player to do something, pick up or unlock or whatever. And just as I had with the Chrono RPG project, I use my custom-made game instance to register, what type of interaction commands are available right now. When these text triggers happen, you register a type of interaction with the game instance, and then when the button is pressed, then the game instance knows, I guess, what kind of interaction to deliver to the player controller. And so, I have an unlock interaction, and then I have my usual grab interaction, which then calls a grabbing ability, and that's how we were able to pick up the barrel. And so this is fairly standard stuff that I've practiced and learned how to do when trying to do situations like these, and it's kind of like a methodology that I've adopted from the days of my earlier project, which is still ongoing, obviously, and nowhere near advanced. And then I also used the other kind of way of linking things together. You saw me, over here pressing on, if I go back to the map, pressing on platforms like these, and then controlling doors like this one. And that's again part of my method of linking like puzzle elements together, and that's how I name things. The thing that represents a puzzle that gets controlled is usually has a puzzle component to it, and then the elements that control it or trigger it or need to be satisfied in order for the puzzle to be solved typically hold a puzzle element component. And so, if we look back at our props, for example, if I'm not mistaken, obviously the door actor has a puzzle component, and appropriately a trigger platform, these little platforms that you step on and trigger stuff, they have a puzzle element. I had to create something a bit more customized for the torches and the fires that light up to kind of give an indication to the player whether they have turned something on or off as well. So that represented, I guess, the kind of the actors and the assets in the world that were interactable or represented kind of elements of a puzzle. And like I said, in this case, for the most part, the puzzles just meant pressing on these platforms and triggering doors, and without having to spoil the surprise, some of these platforms affected some of these step-on platforms affected some of these kind of like blocks, the platform blocks that you step on, and rotated them or moved them in a certain way as well. And these guys move back and forth, and you have to traverse the gaps here, and obviously they get triggered by something more simple like a box trigger directly in the map. I had a timer, as you noticed. One of the things that I had a hard time with was that I started building out a fairly not complicated, but like a fleshed out game mode. But then I ran into problems when I started dealing with UI, and I'll explain what I've done. And for those that are watching, maybe have taken the GameDevTV course, I started with a main menu in a different map. And so I created a map specifically for, I guess, starting the game. And that main menu map basically called up a widget blueprint, which was the main menu blueprint. I kind of regretted that. I should have just had one main map, and all of the UI resided around that map. what happened was that where is it? The main menu blueprint, which was the screen that you saw, and I'll talk a little bit about the other effects here. That prepped up the game, and it said, you know, what happens when you press these buttons, and once you play the game, you press play, please load up, you know, the puzzle run, or in this case puzzle run 2 map, and play the game. However, going back and forth between the game and the main menu meant that a lot of things were not persistent, variables and states, and I mean I sort of knew that, but I didn't remember it in time, and so I started having bugs, obviously, and problematic gameplay, because, you know, when a player would lose their lives, instead of returning to the game as it was, I would reload the map, and I would say, you know, load puzzle run again and start the game. But that would reset everything, which is something that I actually did want to have. You know, if the player died and accomplished some things before a save point, I had to restart him and everything would populate again, and that's why I wanted to, found it easier to kind of have things call up a load map and reset the map. Or then again, if the player died and lost all the 5 lives that I gave them, you would return to main menu. You had the option of pressing play again rather than exiting the application. And again, you know, you would reload the puzzle run map afresh, and so on and so forth. But yeah, like a lot of things though didn't survive. And I was trying to have save points that saved, you know, how many seconds do you have at the save point, how many keys, how many lives, what level you're on. And so I had a fairly fleshed out game mode, but then eventually I had to basically transport everything I had done in the game mode to the game instance, because I guess that's the game instance's role, is there, and it's one per game, and it survives everything, and everything in it survives. And so my game instance saved everything about game rules, which I had put in game mode because I thought the game mode is about the rules, but the rules were data that actually needed to survive, like how many seconds did you start with if the first time or at every level, how much time do you have remaining, you know, and how many keys do you have right now, and things like that. So I moved everything in my custom made game instance. I exposed a lot of stuff to Blueprint, so that then I can call functions through Blueprint if I wanted to, and in many cases I did so. But yeah, I wish I had kind of understood the fact that game mode has some restrictions, and maybe for a single player game where you have to kind of like bounce back and forth between maps or reload the map, then maybe it wasn't the best choice, unless there was a way for me to figure out how to basically load the map once and then control everything through UI in terms of menus and pauses and restarts. But like I said, I would have to think about, you know, if a player starts the game and, you know, picks up a capsule, and I can demonstrate now like what the problem was. You know, you traverse all that successfully. Get out. You avoid the spike. I don't worry about. Let's not worry about. And so this is a save point, you know, as evidenced by this little statue with blinking stars. So now you get 30 more seconds. But like, what happens if you know, if you die here? I had to save that you had like 30 plus seconds coming in, which was like the 1.5 second that you had before crossing the door plus the 30. And also, like, you know, if you pick up this thing for whatever reason and you get penalized with 5 seconds, and if you die, I wanted you to restart, but like, you know, I wanted to reset the map. Then I had to block the door so that you don't go back, but like, if we pause the game and we look back, everything is reloaded again. Obviously, you don't have to go back and redo it, but I found it easier to just reload the map, block your way back, but reset everything that you have to do again because you didn't, save that progress yet. You only saved what you have done before crossing the save point. So anyway, like game mode wasn't really the right way to do this, as it turns out, because I couldn't find a way to probably there was a way, but it would have been tedious to kind of, I don't know, keep track of all the things that have happened and not spawn them again if I reset the game when the player dies. Or actually, better yet, the way to do it perhaps would have been to reset everything that has happened after a save point up till the point that you died. So that, but I found having to keep track of what has happened, and it would have been a lot of assets to keep track of. And I found the easiest way would have been to kind of cheat my way around this by saying, reload the entire map again. Don't go back to see that, things have respawned. But even if you see that they have respawned, so what? Just don't go back. Your access is blocked. Just respawn everything and redo everything before you can save again. So that was my solution. So yeah, lesson learned. Game instance was probably the better thing to do anyway, in this case, because it persists, especially when you have to deal with loading maps. And I contemplated about there's 4 levels, but they're all in a straight line, because when I started the template with Unreal, you guys will have seen it if you tampered with Unreal. Everything was laid out on a long floor, some platform blocks and stuff, and that's it. And I just started from that, and I started extending and extending and extending all the way through. And I just didn't have the time to really learn exactly how map streaming works, the benefits and pros and cons of that or whatever. And so I just did essentially this is one massive level, one map. But we know, with my markers and my UI that counts levels, I segmented it into 4 parts. And everything happens in this level. So yeah, that's about, we've covered, assets in the game, capsules and interactables, and how I dealt with that, with the save points, game mode versus game instance. And now we go to the character. Obviously I started with the mannequin, and for a long while I thought I was just going to submit a game with Mr. Mannequin. Eventually I went to Mixamo and downloaded my Red Hooded Knight here, available for free. I felt like he was one of the very few characters that kind of fit the theme that I was going for, especially if I was going to go and use a lot of assets from the medieval dungeon pack. The challenge was to, I guess, it wasn't so much of a challenge initially. The animation was okay. They have plenty of animations, and the great thing about it is that they are interchangeable. I could have switched out the character anytime I wanted, because I felt comfortable that all the animations that I downloaded for the guy would work if I wanted to switch him out for another Mixamo character. And so, I did my own blueprint, animation blueprint that is. And so, fairly simple. Idle run, crouch walk, the jumping. I gave him a little dance at the end. If he wins, death and when you die, and then we'll talk about climbing the ledges. And so, I guess it's time to talk about that now. One of the problems that I had was I only downloaded animations that were in place, and then I had to deal with the fact that the Mixamo characters have a different way of defining their bone structure. They don't have a root, and the way that Unreal does animation sometimes, the way he tries to interpret them, it needs a root. Everything was working fine because it was all the animations were in place. In terms of, for example, idle run, I created my own blend space based on the existing animations that I could download that were in place. which means that the capsule always follows the character, or rather, I guess, the character stays within their capsule and just play the animation in place, right? The problem was then when I started thinking about climbing, and here's a little story about how that went. Like, I was literally just trying to define I was really trying to come up with a puzzle, and specifically this one, where the character has to move this ledge in a certain way based on switches all around. But then I was trying to make it challenging, and I was like, wouldn't it be fun if you had to actually jump, because you still cannot get close enough, even though you kind of manipulate this little stony ledge, which is different from the brick material next to it. Wouldn't it be fun if you had to jump and just barely cling on to that thing? I was like, oh, my guy needs to climb. And then I started thinking, all my other maps back before, all the ledges were accessible via a well-timed jump. And that's how the idea of a climbing ability came about, which is placed just a little bit earlier in the map right here with this cone. And then my nightmare began, because the climbing animation, unfortunately, where is it? It's climbing ledge. The climbing animation, initially, I mean, it's in place now. Yeah, if you look at this, if you don't enable root motion, the climbing animation steps out of the time of the character's capsule, basically. And I couldn't get it to work in a realistic way, meaning that the character was climbing the ledges, or so it seemed, but then his collision capsule, if you go to the character, the very well known player character viewport. Well, it's not shown here, but if you make it visible, you'll remember that there's a capsule around this guy. So this guy was leaping outside of his capsule. The capsule wasn't following him, and at the end of the animation, he would just slide right back into the capsule. The capsule wouldn't have moved up, and basically climbing wasn't happening. So I managed to find a way by Googling and using Blender. I managed to actually add a root to the skeleton structure of this guy, and that's why I have two blueprints. One was the original one, and then one was the one that uses the skeleton that has the root bone defined. At some point I thought maybe I would create a separate blueprint for the guy and call it root as well, but I just ended up switching out the mesh with its appropriate blueprint within the master blueprint initially that I had created initially. So yeah, and that's how I had to tackle animation. But then it was still a little bit challenging because the capsule now was following, but there were some collision issues, and I had to kind of tweak a lot of things. I had to, if I had to be honest, I had to make some ugly adjustments. I had to create a climbing ability specifically for this guy, just like in the spirit of doing a grabbing ability. I did a climbing ability, and the climbing ability obviously defined actions like climb and then climb ledge. There was some weird, I don't know how to explain it, caching issue where my studio in Unreal could not refresh some changes that I had. So this was a hang function, and this was finish climbing or whatever, and after some changes this was problematic. So climb was working, hang wasn't working, so I hacked it by using the shell of the climb function as the implementation of hanging, and then I added on a climb ledge, which is like the finishing act of climbing the ledge. Anyway, long story short, this is how I've done it, and basically this is a way of making climbing happen, and it actually works with a no, this is a instance, sorry. So if I toggle the code, I basically did it with 3 tracers. Maybe I can just quickly demonstrate this to you guys, but I had tracers that basically whenever we jump, we fire tracers in front of us into the world, and we detect walls, we detect how high these walls go up, we detect whether there is a flat surface, a ledge, associated with a wall that we can cling onto and then climb eventually, because we didn't want to make impossible climbs or climb through walls and other funny things like that, which, trust me, had happened originally, and I had to hunt them down and fix bugs like that. So let's see if this will compile. My frame rates may drop even more as I'm recording this. Project not selected to build for this solution configuration. I don't know what that means. Let's see if we can do this from the editor. I just want to demonstrate how that worked, and obviously, I will admit, guys, I had never done climbing animations before. It was already a nightmare for me to fix the skeleton and make him climb properly. Well, when I say climb properly, I mean like getting the animation to be correct for the skeleton, and then having to spend a lot of time trying to reinvent the wheel about how to make him climb. It wasn't possible. So obviously I admit I googled stuff online. I saw how people implemented that sort of stuff, and I kind of did it in a similar way, but obviously with my own twist as necessary. And this didn't seem to have worked. Shame. I just wanted to show you guys the automatic tracers that shoot across when. That's funny. I don't understand what this means. Project not selected to build for this solution configuration. Yeah, this was the build version. Anyway. I wonder if there's any older versions of this. But in any case, if you have meddled with Unreal, you should be familiar with, it was basically like, shooting lines at every frame rate with a little, small spheres. There was a line going this way to detect the wall. There was a line going downwards from above his head to detect ledges, and then there was another one to detect the exact corner of the ledge and things like that. And that's how I finally achieved a system whereby we could detect things. And the way climbing works, I forgot to mention, is actually I just realized I haven't demonstrated it at all. But if I, for example, zoom my guy all the way to where the capsule is, yeah, you guys will get to see the dungeon area. Let's give you the full screen experience. Oop. And I die, and I join the skeleton. You can see the climbing ability to the side. So this is what I'm talking about. Platforms, triggers that control these moving platforms. And now I have a key, and we get to see unlock interaction. So before we saw a barrel and we were prompted to grab it, now we can just unlock it by pressing the left mouse button again. So I get the climbing ability, and then if I jump to a ledge, I don't have to do anything. I just jump, and automatically, oh, there you go. So I guess I didn't have the climbing ability. I'm sorry. That's why, obviously, I wasn't allowed to climb. And so, you know, these tracers fire every tick while we're in the air. And that was just a way to like make sure that the player always has a chance to climb. I debated whether I should make it another button, but it was just a little bit confusing. Not just confusing, just challenging for a player to always remember, and not just remember, but time their climbing button so that these tracers line up perfectly. So I just made it an automatic type of thing. So as soon as we are in the air, these tracers fire up for the entirety of our, I guess, flight, as it were, in the air. So that if we get near a ledge or a wall, we can start detecting stuff, and if a detection is successful, then we cling on to the ledge, and then you have to press up as a finishing, I guess, button, as a finishing move, and then you climb up. That's how it was implemented. So yeah, so that's climbing ability. You know, the main method being climb, which, as I explained earlier, it used to be called hang. But long story short, something happened. I couldn't reverse it. I had to rename this one climb, and then I had another one that basically was called climb ledge. Essentially, finished the move, and I had to actually. This was another tough thing. The capsule was too large, and it wouldn't kind of smoothly follow the character. I mean, it was following the character, but it was getting stuck around the walls and the ledges, so I had to do a lot of trickery here and reduce the size of the capsule and its radius. I had to do things like adjust the mesh inside as well, relative adjustments between capsule and mesh so that everything worked smoothly. So yeah, like I don't know if I actually did climb there to show you, but like do it again. Traces again, but like that act of, you know, we hang here, but like if you notice how he tries to get over the ledge, just getting him to like be able to stand there and not fall down again, it was a challenge because the capsule was long initially and couldn't basically get around. If you can see my cursor, I don't think it shows on my screen, you know, where his feet are. So basically, you know, I had to do a lot of trickery and manipulate his capsule and his relative size within the capsule and things like that. But it worked at the end. It is not obviously too pretty or too perfect, but it kind of conveys the visual message that, you know, he's climbing, kneeling over the ledge and then using his hands to push up and climb up the ledge. So yeah, so that was my climbing ability as well. Just like I had a grabbing ability. These are not connected with each other. Or are they? I actually forget. No, they're just separate active components, I think. Yeah, they must be active component. Yeah, one came way later after the other. I don't know if it was an argument for having them inherit from the same parent. Maybe. But so that was climbing. And the animations, every other animation was fairly simple. You know, the jumping, the running, crouching. Crouching was just using basically the default implementation of Unreal's character class and the way it crouches and everything. I did have an issue initially where I didn't quite understand how it was working. and I was crouching, but then I was uncrouching into walls and stuff. But that was just a matter of using the wrong boolean to check, some things, whether I'm crouching or not crouching. But once you understand how the interface works, then it's fairly simple. So yeah, that was the effort, trying to see whether there was anything else that I want to talk about. No, I talked about, save points, just a simple actor, that blueprint actor. I think it's under game framework, yeah. Just represented by a few like trigger screens, essentially, depending on, you obviously it's from left to right, so the first one actually triggers a save point, but then the second one was there to kind of, once you reach there, then you block the one before you. Sometimes I felt like you may change your mind and want to go back and do something that you missed. I don't want to lock you out immediately. And then a long process of kind of saving the state and doing it, saving it to the game instance in terms of the level, the starting time, the countdown, the number of keys you have, the number of treasures, and all of these things. Whether you have the ability to climb or not, because imagine if the player dies before you save, and you have taken the climbing ability, and you die before you save, then I take it back. You have to get the ability and then reach the next save point before it's actually saved for good. Things like that. And like I said, game instance worked perfectly. I wish I had known that in the beginning, because I wasted, I think, maybe at least a couple of hours trying to get to the game mode to work the way I wanted it to, but it was a mistake. Lesson learned. I probably do need to follow a couple tutorials more and understand a little bit more of the use of the game framework classes. And even though I have actually seen a few streams online from these guys, but yeah, I just need more practice, I guess. A little bit more practice. So yeah, that was the save point. I used my first interface with Unreal, and I actually kind of did it in code and added it to the blueprints, and that was just that was only used for one very, very specific thing. Who can trigger the flat platforms here, the platform triggers? The player, but then I also wanted to have the barrels be able to sit on top of these guys as weights and enable them as well. And I just quickly wired that up and said that whoever implements this interface, activate trigger platform interface, then can actually manipulate these and press and depress these guys. And so the only two actors that implement that interface are my character, my BP player character, or whatever I call him, BP Knight, and BP Barrel, the asset barrel. Anything else that touches these things does not. And actually, I think maybe the giant ball does as well. Yeah, actually, yeah, because it drops here and kind of randomly set some of these or all of these on. And so yeah, that was kind of my first very, very brief and very short experience with interfaces in the editor, both in Blueprint and well, not really Blueprint, because it's just a C++ shell at the moment. But yeah, I mean, yeah, if I have to be honest, I haven't really delved into them a bit deeper than that. I don't think I need to explain too much about character, and this is fairly explanatory stuff. Well, that's where all my input stuff resided. We talked about the interaction component. That was the master class for the base class for the unlock interaction, the grabbing interaction, and so on and so forth. So 3 weeks later, and many long hours of working on this and sleepless nights and lots of streaming. I streamed a lot of this process on Twitch, and if anyone is watching this video early enough before they get pulled down, you're welcome to check those out as well. So yeah, about 3 weeks I think, because I kind of wasted a week thinking about whether I should participate or not, because like I said, I was already working on a game that had the same kind of feel, not that was on the theme as well. Well, with a specific concept on the theme, time travel. The theme was time, and you could use it any way you wanted. And in my game, I just used it in terms of you just have to you have a limited amount of time, and you gather time capsules. Fairly simple. I didn't talk about UI actually, so yeah, got more practice with doing UI. Really happy about it. I had a main menu, a slightly different pause menu, which originated as a duplicate of the main menu. It needed to be a little bit different because from the pause menu you can resume rather than play the game. But I practiced stuff like sliders, the things that pop into the screen. If I can demonstrate, yeah. So like some of these buttons bring in like the controls menu, which is like a panel that shows you the controls and the credits page. So if I can demonstrate. Don't save anything. So, press this, and there's a full menu here with all the things you can do. And actually, apologies, let me just do it full screen again. So yeah, it was very satisfying coding these things, scripting these things in Blueprint and making them slide appropriately. There are toggle button, there's no kind of escape or close button. A tutorial, credits, I really like to thank some people, some fellow Twitchers that provided help, support, and company when working all these hours, and a couple of buddies of mine that I know in my personal life that work as sounding boards. But yeah, so this is the UI, and actually another element of the UI is the actual timer, or the HUD really, my custom made HUD in Blueprint that had things like your inventory stuff, and when I say inventory, I'm really meaning like how many keys you have and how many treasures you managed to unlock, and your lives, your time remaining, and that kind of level. And actually, a lot of these loop the time and what gets updated. I don't know if that was the most efficient way, but I did it through the blueprint, the map blueprint, the level blueprint. And so, yeah, that's where a lot of the meat of the, I guess, loop was in the blueprint. And unfortunately, I wanted to understand a little bit more about sublevels and sublevel blueprints and maybe subsystems and how these things could have helped me, but a task and a mission for the next time. And apologies, this is not how I normally do work. This is way complicated, and I will, once the game jam kind of finishes, and I don't want to mess with anything. I mean, I can mess with stuff offline, but I don't want to do it because people have access to the source code now if they're interested in, and it was part of the rules of the game jam. And I don't want to start changing things that do not correspond to what people may experience during the game. But yeah, I usually comment stuff. I try to be more organized, but the last couple of days before the deadline, obviously, concerns like that went out the window. I just need to get a product out. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot happening here. Two main drivers, what happens in begin play, how do we set a few things, all that UI needs to get updated at Begin Play with, from the game instance in terms of where we are and lives that we have, the time that we have, and all of these things. And then a massive kind of effort and a massive engine here around the game loop, that gets updated every tick. I find these gates very useful in terms of that effectively control like when the timer stops, and I found it easier to just do it with an event that closes the gate. But yeah, the HUD had to be updated on every tick in terms of the time. This was a mistake, obviously. Once I started down that path with a countdown, I was, like I said, rushing and a bit lazy, and I stuffed other things here just because it was so easy now at that point to add in, because the groundwork was already laid out because of the countdown. I stuffed things like you update the number of keys that you have here in the level blueprint on every tick, rather than sending a notifier, a dispatcher or something. That was, obviously, clearly, that's an overkill and it's a mistake. But for a simple game jam game like that, I felt like I could live with it. It probably, I didn't even have time to check whether it affected the game. Maybe it did. Maybe it didn't. But yeah, I kind of made some of these little minor crimes here. Countdown, I can understand. It needs to be updated every tick. But even that, I could probably do a timer by event. Whatever it's called. Event by timer or something like that. You know what I mean. Rather than having a tick. And then, but yeah, I just found it faster and easier to just say, since I have this already, instead of, besides just updating the countdown, update the number of keys at every time. And, it obviously works, because the minute or the split second that you do get the key or unlock something or unlock the treasure, then these things get updated. So yeah, that's the main purpose of this messiness here. It gets everything updated, and it sends some dispatches in terms of, if player died, close the gate. If we won't, dance, and again, pause the game or finish the game. And so on and so forth. And obviously, as part of Begin Play, some of these bindings to certain events, happen here. Bind event if player died, and things like that. Or bind event if player won. And I think, this is it. That's all I had to talk about. I'm going to I guess I could I want to reverse now the changes that I made to the climbing ability. I could always, I guess, cancel and discard the changes in by source tree by my version control, but just in case, I'm gonna just take everything out. So yeah, the debuggers were obviously very helpful to visualize what I was trying to do and make sure that it was working the way I wanted it to work. And obviously I was kind of always hopeful that after they served their purpose, i.e. to help me design the system, that once I took them out and commented them out, then I would get a bit of boost in performance, or a lesser hit in performance, because yes, we're firing traces into the world every split second, every tick when we jump or we're in the air, but at least we're not drawing these lines and putting stress on the system, on the GPU with those draw calls. And, Okay, I think that's all of them, and let me just make sure that .debug, and I guess I could have commented out the I could have commented out the includes as well, the headers. Anyway, wow, I missed at least two. It seems like. Okay. And I have to do it again from here. Let me just close all these windows. I guess as a last thing before I end this video, I'll treat you to a run, and let's see how far let's see how far I get to. Maybe you get to see the entire game, or maybe not. 5 lives, that's all I have. Obviously I've had quite a bit of practice. I'm hoping that the frame rates will be somewhat decent. My system is not very strong. Not very powerful. One of the things that I struggled with, and I forgot to mention, was that in my efforts to cut down the size of the game, especially because I had to upload it to HIO, I went with not using the pre-computed light maps. So this is all real time, I think. Light, whatever that means. So maybe there's even bigger hit on performance, I don't know. I had to make the barrel not collide with those spikes so it goes through them. Otherwise the barrel was getting stuck on the spikes all the time. So I had to come up with workarounds like that. Sounds, downloaded a lot of free stuff from free sites. Lots of kind of testing what works and what doesn't. Probably most of them seem a little bit incompatible with each other, but just the music alone, like the soundtrack, and then a silly kind of winning tune that I have at the end. Just these two alone were like 20 megabytes or something, or it's one of the larger assets in the game. So I seem to be doing okay so far. Avoid some of these deadly traps. Another key. Oops. Too soon. Oh, we have 50 seconds. Now I wonder whether I've made this perhaps too easy. But I don't know, some people told me actually that it is quite challenging with those jumps and those spikes. I can actually just drop me over there. And then you heard probably once again the unlocking. Oops. One of the things that I actually find frustrating now is that the guy is actually a long jumper. Well, this is another cool little trick that I'm revealing here and how to beat this. I didn't do the most excellent job on lighting. I really need to learn how to light. There's a light here that casts shadows. Probably shouldn't be doing shadows. So we get through that door by synchronizing the door and the spikes. There's another switch here, another platform trigger that rotates stuff. The other one, oh, and we ran out of time. How do we manage that? Ooh. Tricky. I have 13 seconds. Huh. I'm guessing now that we will not have enough time to finish this. Oh no, okay. That was the end of it. I mean, I don't know why I bother now. I don't have enough time. Let's get some practice, it's fine. With 12 hundredths of a second to go. Oh no. You guys, you will not get to see the death ball rolling. But you can check out the preview that I have posted on my channel. Actually, ooh. Yeah, see, this is the delay. It's a very enjoyable. I didn't realize I wasted so much time here. Ooh, barely. No. Time's up. Well, that's it, folks. It's the best I could do. I couldn't beat my own game. That tells you something. It's challenging, but I hope it was fun. I hope you you enjoyed this video. Hope you liked it. Leave your comments if you want, especially if you have something to advise me on and tell me where I may have gone wrong or something that you think I could have done better. Tell me what you think of the game. You know, go to itch.io, find the GameDevTV Jam page, and you know, check out the submissions, check out Brutal Times from CodingRook, and tell me what you think. You can download the game for free. Apologies for the size. I warn you, it's nearly 1 gigabyte. I need to figure out how to compress it a bit more. But anyway, this was my short 1-hour devlog on the creation of my first ever completed Unreal Engine 4 game, a 2.5D platformer, puzzle platformer, Brutal Times. Thanks for watching. This has been CodingRook.